I thought of a different point. Maybe it's the same point. Um, I, I was thinking of a metaphor or analogy for life. So most of you are familiar with Amazon, where you go online, you place an order, and then eventually a box or a package comes in the mail, and then whatever we ordered is inside. And so one way I think we can look at life is that like there's a conveyor belt carrying different boxes in front of us. I'm going to mix a couple of metaphors. I'm going to refer to the Russian doll metaphor, but in this case I'm going to use boxes. And so we have these boxes, right? And in many boxes, and occasionally we say, "Oh, I want that box," and so we choose a box, and then that's the box we take home with us. And then, I don't know, maybe for some people they get to choose many boxes every day. Other people, they choose a big box once every few years and then a couple regular boxes here and there. And then we take them home and we get this box. And some of the boxes, when we unpack them, like I referred to, there's nothing inside. It's just hollow, nothing. Or maybe there's a slip inside, and the slip says, tough life lesson. But otherwise, there's nothing inside, right? So that's some of the boxes we choose. Another box is when we take them home. Um, we open it up, and ooh, there's a nice thing inside, a beautiful Russian doll. Yeah, and then eventually that Russian doll, after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, decays, and we're like saddened, and oh my God, this precious Russian doll that came in my box that I chose uh, is no good, and I have to throw it away. But then as it decays, it kind of falls apart, and lo and behold, there's a even more beautiful Russian doll inside, and we're like, amazing, and we cherish that Russian doll, and maybe the one sort of the one truth, undeniable truth of reality is impermanence. And so every Russian doll decays, right? And so even this inner Russian doll, maybe after a couple more decades, decays. And again, we're saddened and we grieve it. Oh my God, this thing, that's the most precious thing. But then as it decays, we look, oh my God, there's an even more beautiful Russian doll on the inside. And we're gladdened again. But of course, the process is difficult. And, uh, and And then I suppose, okay, I'm going to mix metaphors, but the Cracker Jacks box. I don't do those even exist? But when I was growing up, we got Cracker Jacks, and you know, most of the time I didn't even want to eat it, but I'd open it from the bottom so I could get to the surprise inside, and most of the time it was just a lame sticker or just something I didn't even want. But just the whole thing of like, oh, there's a surprise inside, right? So maybe the ultimate surprise or the ultimate innermost doll is what we call love, like the purest kind of love, right? And every box promises love in some ways, right? In fact, let's say when we go to the conveyor belt to choose box, every box is labeled love because that's what we think we're getting. Oh my God, it's love. But this one, oh my God, there's nothing inside, just tough life lesson. Slip of paper says, you have learned a tough life lesson. And we're like, fuck, one of these boxes again. So, so yeah, that's life. And maybe ideally what we would want is to have a really good sense of choosing so that every box we choose, of course, every box decays. Every inside of every box is a Russian doll, and uh, even those decay. So that's a given in life. The impermanence is an undeniable aspect of living. So all these things decay, but as they decay, maybe what we deeply want, deep in our hearts and souls, is that deep inside of each Russian box is another Russian doll, is inside another Russian doll, I mean. And then in the end, we find the innermost Russian doll, which I'm calling love or truth, whatever. And, and we would ideally like to have every box be like that. And on a personal level, I've had opportunities to choose many boxes, and I'm not talking about relationships only. I'm talking about like jobs, career choices, also hobbies, also different organizations to be involved with, and so on, or different groups of people, different friendships, so many pursuits. Like, for example, when I was young, when I was about 18, 19, I really got into rollerblading. About a year or two ago, I started playing pickleball for like 6 months, whatever. That didn't last. But now I have 2 or 3 pickleball rackets. I'm just going to give them to my parents. But, so I've had the opportunity to choose many boxes, like most humans. And I've had my share of empty boxes and my share of like boxes that seem to go deeper and deeper, and there's love near the center, or at least I'm in the phase of like an inner Russian doll, but not quite at the purest level, but still a beautiful Russian doll, closer to truth, closer to love. And so, having had enough experience at this point in my life, unfortunately, right, maybe fortunate that at this point, but in some ways I could say unfortunate that I wish I had this when I was 10 or 15. But having had this experience of viewing many, having chosen many boxes, I, I'm fairly confident in, I have a sense of how to choose boxes at this point. I'm confident that I have a correct heuristic for choosing a box that has a box inside, that has a box inside, that has a box inside, and so on. And not choosing boxes that are empty. Now, occasionally I still choose kind of semi-empty boxes, but usually those are like, $1 boxes, like at Temu or something. I'm like, just wasted 2 weeks of my life. Or pickleball, I just wasted 3. I didn't really waste it because it was fun. But yeah, and so you might ask, well, what's that heuristic, Yuichi? And so anyone who's watched many of my videos, I think, might be able to predict what that heuristic is. You might be like, this shit again. But yeah, I can separate all the boxes, most of the boxes I've chosen in my life. I can't say all because I don't remember all the boxes I've chosen. But out of all the boxes I can remember, I can separate them into 2 bins, the empty ones and the ones that have something inside. And I can separate them also by what was my motivation for choosing the box. And all the empty ones, I can say the predominant motivation was some aspect of selfishness or serving my wants. Yeah. So, like, to use a very blatant example in terms of relationship, I've pursued or engaged in relationships with the motivation of either lust, as in just want sex, or some form of desire in the form of, I just want this person. It may not have been even lust, but it may have been, wow, they're so attractive that I want to be with them, which is still kind of selfishness. And all of them I can put in the category of, by the time the box was emptied, it was just nothing inside. On the other hand, all the pursuits that have had something on the inside, all the boxes that I've chosen that have had something of meaning on the inside besides a hard life lesson, they had some element of motivation, of one of 2 motivations or both motivations. And those would be some element of growth. In other words, I was pursuing some form of growth, inner growth, in some form or another. And I could say spiritual growth in one form or another. And the other motivation was, there was some motivation of trying to be helpful, trying to be of benefit, whether being of benefit to the person or persons that I was involved with, or through engagement. For example, reading a book with a motivation of, can I learn something here so that I can be more helpful to the people in my life? Yeah? Or can I, or a workshop or a retreat that, can I learn something? Can I experience something here so that I can then bring it into my relationships or into uh, whoever, other people's lives, so I can be of greater benefit? I've also done like retreats and workshops where it was more about, how can I learn this so I can benefit myself, right? And so that's not quite the uh, packed box, it turns out. So when both motivations are present, those have been the most important boxes. Now, I'm not some saint, so I don't. That's not been the most frequent choices. But I've had many choices where, so for example, the person I talked about in the third story, when I met that person, I remember my motivation was growth. She was pretty and everything, but that wasn't, like, I think I'm being honest with myself. Even back then, I knew my motivation was, I wanted to grow through this relationship. Now, through the course of the relationship, and because she had health problems, the motivation of being helpful came later. But so I think by that second motivation coming in, it then became somehow like, in the middle of the night while I was sleeping, Santa Claus just popped in and stuffed that box full of more stuff, or stuck an inner doll inside the doll that was already in the box. Whatever. But so I think sometimes other motivations can come in. I remember when I was young, I used to write songs, and if someone asked, if I asked myself what was my motivation, I probably would have, if I was being honest, I probably would have said fame, or acknowledgement at least. Acknowledgement of how cool or creative I was. So when that faded, there was almost nothing there. But there was some element of growth. Like if someone asked me, I would have said, yeah, fame, acknowledgement. But underneath that, there was also this fascination with the creative process. And I felt that by doing it, I wanted to learn more about what was going on in the creative process. And so, did anything come of writing songs? No, absolutely not. But there was a tiny little, like, Cracker Jack's prize. It wasn't just hard life lesson. It was like finding a little toy gun, or I don't know. That little thing that happened, the little surprise on the inside, wasn't this amazing thing, but what it was a deeper understanding of the creative process. And later, when I started writing, I was writing books actually, or I was writing already, but later when I focused on actually writing something to publish, a lot of those ideas came into play. That many of the things that I had learned in the creative process of trying to write songs, I remembered, and they supported me in the writing of the books. So it wasn't just empty hollowness and tough life lesson. But what was it? The growth motivation was present in that. So yeah, I've said this at least for the past 5-10 years, but when I'm about to engage or involve myself in an endeavor or a relationship or any kind of involvement with an other, whether that other is a hobby, piano, whatever, if I can't find some motivation of inner growth or service to others, I won't even touch it. I mean, as much as I want to, like as an example, like if I have I've had a couple opportunities to pursue like an attractive woman, but I knew that there wasn't the slightest bit of growth other than pain. But if I was being honest with myself, it was just lust. It was just lust and possessiveness. And so, as much as I wanted to, as a man, or as a, I don't know, as a regular kind of guy, I didn't move forward with it. I just couldn't. My feet were like stuck to the ground, and so I was like torn. Like some part of me just wanted to go, like pull every trick in the book I could to seduce the person or win the person over, but a deeper part of me, my heart was just like, "Ah, I can't do it," and wouldn't do it. And but just in smaller ways too. Recently, I took up the piano, and I don't really have a service benefiting others' motivation. Oh, other than recently, my mom asked me if I could record something for her. And so I said, I'll practice so that when I visit you, we can look for a piano and I can play for you. And if I could play for my mom and that could make her happy in any way, I mean, it might irritate her because I'm not that good, but if it would make her happy, that's that's enough help and service for me. In my book, I'd rather make someone I care for smile. To me, that's like if I were to have a point system. When I was young, it was different, but to me, doing something for someone that I'm close to in a small way counts for way more than doing something grand for 10,000 people I don't even know. When I was young, I was more motivated by like trying to help the world in some large capacity. But as I've grown older, that just hasn't meant as much as just sort of being present for the people that matter, and or that have a real genuine connection with. And so to me, that kind of help or service toward my mom, it may sound tiny, but I would choose that over, like, let's say writing a book and it becoming a bestseller, and I don't know, 5,000 people talk about it and write reviews on Amazon. Yeah, about how it changed their life. I would choose making my mom smile and making her day as a more meaningful service at this point in my life. And so there is that service component. But here's the growth component for me of why I'm practicing piano, is that in order for me to get better, I have to listen carefully. I have to listen to my playing over and over and as I'm playing. And that's my primary motivation for practicing piano right now. And so it's a growth of sharpening my capacity to listen. And okay, in terms of service, I have this feeling, I have this confidence or this faith that that will improve my ability to listen to others. So yeah, so I have both motivations. So maybe that's the reason why I'm able to do it like 30 minutes to an hour every day so far, since I started on July 17th of this year. And whether I play a piece well is just kind of a side effect for me as far as I'm concerned. Of course, I have enough sufficient ego as a human being to where, yeah, it'd be nice to play something nice and show off whatever, but that's not my main motivation here. It's to have a place where I can practice listening, and because I want to become a better listener, and uh, and then I have the motivation of one day playing one or two or three pieces for my mom, and she can be like, "Wow, it's so nice." It's very hard to find classical music tickets in Japan. I've tried over and over, and but I'm only there for limited periods of time, and so I don't have a large selection. And whenever I go online, they're sold out. Unlike here, where you can find tickets to almost any performance, unless it's that Yuja Wang or or you know what I mean, or Yo-Yo Ma, or some, either you have to be very sexy or famous, and otherwise you don't sell out classical, or or I mean, speaking from the performer side. So anyway, that's the point. This is very long-winded, but the point is, to summarize, I'm of the belief that if one wants to choose boxes that have beautiful Russian dolls, the key is to examine one's motivation for involvement, or one's motivation for choosing a box. And if the more one's motivation is infused with inner or spiritual growth and benefiting others, the more meaningful, or the better, the more meaningful the contents of that box are going to be. And the more likely that in the end one will find the prize, love and truth. That's all it comes back to in the end, isn't it? Love and wisdom, or in the Dharma tradition, it would be called compassion and wisdom. But I prefer just using love and truth. Same thing, just different words. And what brings us there is love and wisdom. So the seed already contains the result. Yeah. The motivation to even choose a box contains within it the fulfillment, the culmination of the involvement. What we're looking for is love and wisdom. Ultimately, that's the innermost doll after unwrapping all the boxes and dolls. But that love and wisdom is inherent in our choice, and it shows in our motivation. Whereas if the motivation is full of self and ego, and I want this and I want that, and this is what I want, and I want more money and I want fame and I want this, there's not a lot of love and truth in that, yeah. And so at the same time, I want to say that I love the Native American trickster deity, right? So sometimes we can be tricked into doing the right thing through the wrong motive. So sometimes I've had many times in my life where my initial motivation was pretty selfish and foul, but for whatever reason, I get tricked into doing the right thing, and pretty soon my motives shift into what I would call the right motive, where it's coming from a place of truth and love. And I'm like, I got tricked into it again. But to me, that's the power of truth and love, right? Sometimes I've done things out of this wrong motive, but I'll hear the truth. And in hearing the truth, I'll wake up and be like, oh, that's why I'm here, not the original motive that I thought I was here for. And and then so that's the case where we're like in the middle of our sleep. The empty box we had chosen is swapped for a better box, and we don't even realize it. But somehow the box has been swapped, and when that box decays, we'll find a beautiful thing on the inside. Anyway, I'm probably saying the same thing over and over.